once the forum starts. So before I do the introduction, is there anyone that has ushers? Where my ushers at? Hey, where my ushers at? We just need some music now. Hey, where my ushers at? Hey. All right. All right, good stuff, good stuff. All right. Good stuff. All right. Okay, so are we ready now to proceed?
Yes.
Oh, y'all don't sound excited. Are y'all ready to proceed? What I'm talking about. We want these candidates to know that we're pumped up, we're ready to go, and we want to hear what they got to say. So, our moderator for tonight will be Ms. Elisa Katz. I hope I said her name correct because I can't stand saying somebody's name wrong. Amen. All right. Are y'all ready to meet the candidates that showed up for you? They want to hear you. They want to know you're out here. Huh? Come on, y'all. I like that. Oh, she got a cast on her head. So this is what she's doing. Come on, girl. I'll see you. I'll see you. All right. The candidates that did show up are Mr. Scott Stringer, former New York City Controller. Mr. Michael Blake, former New York Assembly member. And Mr. Grant Landry couldn't make it. He's the New York City Controller. But instead of representative, Ms. Celeste Hornback. And now, I'm gonna get out y'all way for a little something. I'm gonna turn it over to the moderator right now. Y'all good? All right, see you later.
Can you hear me? Yes, this is working. Hi, everybody. I'm Alyssa Katz. I'm the executive editor of the City.NYC. We're a nonprofit newsroom covering the elections, covering politics, covering the Florida. I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for having me here tonight. What I'm going to do, you heard the introductions to the candidates. Each of the candidates or representatives is going to speak for a couple of minutes about their vision for housing, and then we will get to questions that come from you, the members of AHIFA and Q Formal. Am I pronouncing that right? Okay, great. So why don't we start with Celeste, who's representing residents.
Okay. Can everyone hear me okay? Yes. Great. First, I just wanted to say how disappointed Brad was that he couldn't be here tonight. He's a longtime supporter of HDFC co-ops and Mitchell-Lama co-ops. He wanted to be here very badly, which is why I agreed to do this, even though I really don't like public speaking. So, yeah, so Brad's platform has 4 pillars. Build more housing with a focus on deeply affordable housing. Protect tenants. Increase funding for right to counsel and defend the HSTPA, which is the Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act, which protects rent stabilized tenants, and own, which is greatly increasing opportunities for homeownership across the city of New York, and fix the city's housing agencies so that they work better to accomplish all of those goals. I'll focus a little on the own component, given the topic tonight. How many golf courses do people think there are? How many municipal golf courses do people think there are in the city of New York? 60? Okay, that's a high number. Within the 5 years. 16? Okay, it's a little bit less than that. There's 12. But in land area, it's equal to about 4.5 times the size of Central Park. So Brad's platform calls for turning 4 of those golf courses into new Mitchell-Lama type developments that would have basically creating new neighborhoods, just like the large Mitchell-Lama developments of the past, right? Co-op City is the largest cooperative development in the world. It's over 15,000 units of housing. It has schools, it has retail and commercial spaces, it has open green area where residents can play with their kids and, you know, sit outside on the lawn on a nice day. Golf courses are an exclusive use of parkland, right? That only people with access to golf clubs and, sort of the habit of golfing, which is not that many members, I don't think, can use. These new spaces can include new parkland and new cooperative housing and infrastructure that our city deeply needs. That is like one of the core pillars that I think would be most exciting to people in the room. 30 seconds. Okay, great. I think another key thing is fixing the city's housing agencies. Everyone in this room, as you know, a shareholder in a Mitchell-Lama or an HDFC co-op, has to interact fairly regularly with the city's housing agencies, and knows how difficult that can be to get the support that you need. So having city housing agencies that really understand the issues that you're facing and have the tools to provide the support you need. It can be really frustrating to call HPD and feel like you know more than they do about your housing problem, right? And kind of you do because you're an expert, but they should have solutions and help problem solve with you. So making sure that those housing agencies are staffed well and have staff on hand who know how to support you in the way that you need and the tools that they have, and have the tools that they need to, you know, just actually materially support you, get you the capital funding that you need to do the local law 97 requirements that you have to do. Help a shareholder who is dealing with a board that isn't being responsive, all of those things, not like there.
Before we move on to Michael Blake, I wanted to make sure I can see the interpreter because the lighting is very bright. You're over there. Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. And because we have interpretation going on, I want to make sure that we are all speaking clearly. And I made the mistake of using acronyms that I think you all know. Affordable housing is for all, and Cooperators United for Mitchell-Lama. But I want to just remind the panelists to, make sure that we're saying full words when you can before using acronyms and speaking slowly. So Michael Blake.
Right. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. So many friends in the room that I've worked with over the years, when I was the chair of the Mitchell-Lama committee, and all things we'll come back to. It's just great to be with you again. For those that are meeting for the first time, my name is Michael Blake. I served as an assembly member for 6 years in the South Bronx. I'm a New York native, born and raised. I'm that kid there. We got cops in the Bronx. I appreciate that. DS 79 118 DeWitt Clinton High School. As an alum, son of Jamaican immigrants. My daddy was an 1199 SEIU man in Mount Hospital, Florida. My mama raised 4 boys at a manufacturing plant where she worked for close to 40 years. Left from here and had the opportunity to go work for President Obama, and don't we miss a real president? Right. I led the minority business program, I led African American outreach, I led our efforts around how to make sure we were implementing affordable care. I came back home and was in the assembly for 6 years, representing the South Bronx and the 79th district. And serving in that capacity, I was able to work with many people in this room when I chaired the Mitchell-Lama committee, and with meetings we did together, we addressed something that was very frustrating for so many people, which is the waiting list, where too often people were getting jumped on the waiting list over and over again. It was totally unfair what was happening to that regard. This is very personal to me. As a Bronxite, we know about Co-op City. My godparents live at 8 Fort Hill Oval. So you've seen the dynamics of what's happening when we're actually not focusing on repairs on time, we're actually not empowering you on time. And too often we're not actually having true tax incentives to support you consistently. I've done this work throughout my career, been a small business owner, which I am right now, around the strategy group and Kairos Democracy Project. As it relates to why am I running for mayor? We deserve generational change. We need to have new leadership in City Hall. I'm very focused on how do we achieve several things. First, how do we make you keep more money in your pocket? Which we can do that by having a local median income, because area median income is not working for us here in New York City. It is simply not right, it's simply not wrong. It happens in the community. We can find more ways to actually empower you when it comes to housing. And I do not believe we should have credit scores used when it comes to rent home ownership applications. They have been barring people out too often. But we also have to make sure we expand our income thresholds, because you should not have to be rich or poor enough to get access to a home in New York City.
Come on.
We have to be more intentional about what we're doing for our children. And I do believe that they should have civics, financial literacy, and mental health before they graduate. And make sure that there's an opportunity to automatically go to community automatically. We can actually have a greater vision around what's happening in our communities, with public transportation being on time, with automation with our trains without losing jobs, while also our buses being on time by addressing double parking and potholes in our streets. When people are asking, how do you have increased public safety? By having a focus of having more of our officers do street patrol, but let's be clear, our officers are not trained in mental health concerns. Our mental health professionals need to address the mental health concerns happening in our communities. And when you're asking, how do we pay for all this? Through a vacant apartment tax, which has been implemented in other cities across the country, which will generate about $400 million. If someone's not living here in New York, we should be able to generate that revenue. The $2 billion right now of unclaimed fees and fines, in particular from unparking. Oh, slow down. Let them in. And being intentional, lastly, that if and when Donald Trump and Elon Musk continue to come for us, that we withhold setting federal taxes in DC. You're not going to be in a scenario where you're going to stand up against us. We have to fight back at what's happening right now. So again, my name is Michael Blake. Our website is BlakeFORNYC.com. And I look forward to the questions that we have tonight, and I hope to become your mayor come January 1st. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next up is Scott Stringer. And I'd like to remind our candidate and representatives to speak slowly to make sure the interpreters have a chance to keep up. Scott Stringer.
Hi, everybody.
Hey.
Nice to be here with all of you. Look, for me, the journey of affordable housing started with some of you in this room, and I'm going to call it out 40 years ago, when many of us fought day and night, night and day in Albany and in this community to save the Mitchell-Lama housing program. It was the best program ever devised. And we fought to keep it because, as you know, the loophole in the law was that these buildings could be bought out after 20 years. And we stood with Mitchell-Lama co-ops and renters and said, we've got to keep this housing. Because it was more than an affordable housing unit. When you moved into Mitchell-Lama, you sort of had a compact with the community. And that was to build the community, to build the schools and the daycare centers, to create a way of life that was very special, that was integrated, that was a place where kids could grow up and have the joy of living in the greatest city in the world. We have got to go back to building the next generation of affordable housing. And we should model it after the program that I fought so hard to protect. I, as controller, did two important audits that spurred my housing plan. The first is we did an audit of 1,000 vacant properties that the city owned, we own it, taxpayers own. And that housing, those parcels can be used for the next Mitchell-Lama 2.0. That we can once again go back into the Mitchell-Lama business. Because when you have the free land and you have the subsidies and you have the power of the people in the communities, you give that land back to the not-for-profits. You give it for the limited profit developers. That's what I want to do as mayor, to build the tens of thousands of units and recreate places like the West Side urban renewal area, to build buildings like Park West Village again, to start thinking about how we can create the new home ownership paradigm of what all of you stand for here tonight. That's why I'm doing this. Now, I think I have the skills not just to pay the bills, controller, 8 years, I know the finances of the city, the back of my hand. As borough president, I showed what we can do when we listen and build community-based planning. That's what I did, diversified our community boards, listened to people. In fact, I will tell you, and I hold everyone accountable to this, I've gone to more community meetings and more community board meetings than any human being in New York City. When other kids were playing baseball, I got appointed to the community board by Percy Sutton. When other kids were playing football, I was campaigning for my cousin Bella Absent, when she ran for Congress. So I've been there. This is my life's work, and I want to be mayor because I have skin in the game. I have 2 little kids. They're not my grandkids. They're actually my children, 13 and 11 and a half. I want them to grow up the same way I did, having that wonderful diverse city experience, the cultural mecca of the world, the center of the universe. I think we can get there, but to be a mayor, you're going to need vision on housing and education. healthcare, but you also gonna need competence and experience. And I take my 30-year record in the assembly as a reformer, as a Manhattan Borough president, as controller, where we're divested from fossil fuel, guns, and private prisons. I want to put that activism to work for the city of New York and straighten out the city once and for all. We do not have to take corruption. We do not have to accept minimalism. This is our moment in history for all of us to finish the work, what we all started. I hope we get there. Thank you.
Right.
Okay, thank you, for those introductions. Now, these questions, came from you, from the membership and the organizations. And, I'm going to mix them up a little bit to make sure that both the HDFC folks here and the Mitchell-Lama folks here are all in the conversation, but not mixing it up so much that the candidates and all of us get mixed up about what we're talking about. So I will do my best here. So I'm going to start with HDFC's, Housing Development Fund Corporation, co-ops. And, first question is that HDFC co-ops are facing rising costs and decreasing affordability due to increased capital repair needs, compliance with local laws such as Local Law 97, and an insurance affordability crisis. What kind of support would your administration provide to HDFC co-ops to help them address these challenges? Start with that.
Great. I mean, I guess I want to start just by sort of acknowledging the stewardship of everybody in the room here and kind of take a moment and actually just appreciate the work that everyone has done over the last several decades of protecting this resource of affordable housing across the city. I think so often, I know so often that residents of these buildings were given limited funds to make the repairs when they took them over from city ownership, right? So we're told you can fix the roof, but you have to wait to fix the boiler. You had to make tough decisions about paying property taxes and paying the water and sewer bill, or making those repairs to make sure that your building was in good condition and that shareholders had a safe roof over their heads. So that stewardship deserves, to be appreciated by the city with ongoing support, and that is technical assistance and capital dollars to make those repairs. I think starting off, thank you. With HPD, so much of this too is just about having an agency that is interested in partnering with HDFC co-ops and coming from a place of that shared partnership, that you are working with the city, right, to protect this resource of affordable housing rather than a place of distrust or policing, right? So I think there is like a sort of attitude in there that needs to be from the top down at these agencies to ensure that you're working in partnership. And then I think it's very simple in terms of just like actually putting resources there. More robust technical assistance, either if it's, directly through the city or through technical assistance provider like UHAB, making sure that UHAB is actually getting funded to do the work so that they can stay open and keep funding their great staff who are here in this room. And then capital dollars, just making sure that the city actually has loan programs and subsidy in place that, work to make the repairs that you need.
A budget shows one's values. And so to your question, very concretely, when you look at a $114 billion budget in New York City, and we're talking about what's in our purview, it is our responsibility to take more of those dollars and support you to be able to make the capital improvements that you need. You have a system and a process with HPD and others that are, quite frankly, it's inefficient, it's not helpful, it's not collaborative with you often and over again. When we think about Local Law 97, you have the amount of buildings, about 30 in particular, that have been making a great progression around solar panels in particular. But to take the next step of actually implementing these laws at a particular degree, we have to actually increase the dollars set aside for them. And in large part, it's not happening because dollars being spent through our city budget that is actually not helpful to you. When you think about the $1.4 billion in particular in NYPD overtime, which by their own account was not around public safety, that's more money that we could be doing to help HDFCs. When we think about the mismanagement that's been happening around health between DOH and MH and HAC, there's more money that can go towards what's happening to HDFCs. So very concretely, When we think about capital improvements, it's first, increase dedicated dollars to be allocated for this. Second, a better collaborative effort what's happening in Albany, because a lot of these changes also happening will require some state funding as well to do this. And then third is just a different approach on how we reimagine what happens over the next, 4 to 5 years at a minimum. And too often, our strategies of saying, we want for you to have the better infrastructure that is more intentional around energy efficient infrastructure. In order to do that, we have to give you the funding to be able to do that at scale. And we are not doing that effectively in the city. That is something that I'm ready to do as your.
Before getting to Scott Stringer, I just want to ask all of you, specifically on local law 97, do you see any need to work with the council to either delay implementation or penalties or take other actions on the law itself, right? Because I think people can talk a little bit about helping with financing of the changes, but even with financing, actually undertaking the work is challenging. And I'm just curious whether any of you would want to address that.
So look, I think for the HDFCs, I think what I knew as controller. It wasn't that the city was just being unresponsive and didn't want to give you the basic funding to do basic repairs. They actually were kind of hoping you all would go away. And you know it, and I know it, and we fought to keep you whole. The truth is that we have got to rethink our housing priorities. And that's why this debate, this discussion tonight is so important, because in addition to Mitchell-Lama, the HDFCs have not just created affordability and home ownership, but you've also created community. In fact, the sweat equity that you put into buildings not just make the building valuable, but makes the community valuable. And that's so the question is, how do we get there? The damn tax credit's going to expire in 2029. We must start planning now to keep it and expand it. There's legislation in Albany that will uplift as I will support that as mayor, as a former assembly member. I understand how much New York City depends on Albany, and we're going to reprioritize that. And in terms of Local 197, look, as the controller that made the historic investment in fossil fuel, I understand the impact of climate change, but I also understand you can only do what you can do. And there's a difference between a big for-profit developer that owns 80-story buildings and dealing with Local 197 and affordable co-ops I've visited in Queens and in Brooklyn who tell me that it's punitive, the fines are too much, and the agencies are totally unresponsive to helping them. I will straighten out these agencies without cleaning house when I become mayor. The corruption days are over. We're going to reconstitute the city government. I think we can get there. Thank you.
Local law 97 specifically.
I don't think we should have delays on Local Law 97 because we don't have the luxury of delaying impacting our environment and climate. And the responsibility has to be, how do we help do it better as opposed to walking away?
Yeah, Brad does not support rolling back Local Law 97. In the most recent rulemaking as well, there is like the opportunity for owners to ask for an extension. So I think a component of that is like, identifying the affordable co-ops that are on the list and making sure that they have, the tools and the capital that they need. And that's, I think that as well, a lot of that's really more of a Mitchell-Lama concern. I think there's a number of HDFCs that have to comply with Local Law 97 outside of the prescriptive pathway. And the investment that's needed is significant. So I think the state and the city really need to think about how to partner to provide those dollars to make sure that the Mitchell-Lama co-ops can comply.
Okay. So moving on to Mitchell-Lama specifically, so Mitchell-Lama cooperative housing is the closest thing to affordable housing for the working class that exists in New York City and must be preserved as such. This is coming from the Cooperators United in Mitchell-Lama. Mitchell-Lama buildings are all about 60 years old and require ongoing money to maintain them. And I think massive maintenance increases to help pay for these capital investments are a major concern. And that these cooperatives just feel that they can't sustain. So, the question is, what are you prepared to put in place to assure that Mitchell-Lama cooperatives have access to funding for the capital work that must be done regularly, to maintain this critical affordable housing? And actually, Michael, I'll start with you because I think you talked very broadly about reinvesting from lease into housing capital investments. But can you get a little more specific about with Mitchell-Lama in particular, how you could foresee implementing that kind of investment?
I'm gonna joke and say that if you're looking for a Mitchell-Lama candidate, since Scott and I talk about Mitchell-Lama 2.0 all the time, and you want to talk about ranked choice voting, you have your options right here. Something like that right there, right? Yes, we got local brand too. You can see on brand, and it's made clear about that, right?
Don't you like that right choice?
Ranked choice voting, ranked choice voting. I had Concourse Village in my district. I still remember where my office was, and I saw this often where people were trying to figure out how do you have basic repairs that were consistently not happening, in part because you had leadership that wasn't supporting what was going on there from a capital standpoint. And so very concretely, number one, we have to increase the dollars when it comes to capital budgets as it relates to Mitchell-Lama. Very direct. Right? Oh, slow down, forgive me. I'm Jamaican. Yeah. We have to increase the allocation. I'll use my preacher voice right now, right? Increase the capital allocation that is within the city budget around Mitchell-Lama funding very directly. We have not been doing that to a great degree. Second, we have to be serious around what are the specific capital improvements that have to happen for these particular buildings developments. And can we, as a city, negotiate in bulk so those expenses are lower when it's happening to you? We have to utilize the leverage that we have of leading the greatest city in the world to be able to assess if 17 buildings are communicating the same capital concern, then why are we then not negotiating at whole to be able to help you to have a lower cost of house implemented? Third, we have to be better of getting you better vendor options that can move faster. Because too often you are delayed on the execution because you have really poor vendors that are not helping and doing it correctly and well. And so to that degree, to your question, it's about the funding, it's about better management, and it's about giving you better options. And if you go onto our website, we laid out a vision around this called Welcome Home. So on blakefornyc.com in our Welcome Home section, we lay out how we can have that next generation of affordable housing for Mitchell-Lama.
Let's go to you, Scott, and we'll wrap up this session.
Well, let me, rank choice Michael Blake. I
Get on video, get on video.
I think he raises an issue that the city should do more of, which is make sure that we do things in bulk and use our purchasing power with vendors who get it. I would also include a $500 million loan fund geared towards women, minority business vendors who work in communities where so many of these developments are, but don't have the opportunity to do the work because the work is basically being done by the same old. I would like to see that extended. But I also want to mention, that when it comes to repairs, the city has to do its share. And again, this goes back to philosophy, but it also comes back to experience. We have got to have city agencies, HPD and the like, that understands that economically, it is easier to fix the boiler when it starts to run its course than wait 10 years and have to replace 5 floors and all the wires, right? And that really takes an agency that understands that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And that's something that I think we should initiate and think about going forward.
So concretely, Brad's housing plan calls for tripling HPD's capital budget each fiscal year over the next 4 years. So that increase in capital dollars is in the beginning is largely to get these stalled projects out the door. And as people who have worked with HPD here know, there's a bit of a backlog in affordable housing. But in addition, it's to increase the loan products and the capital funding that goes towards HDFC co-ops, creating new ones in addition to supporting the existing HDFC co-ops and Mitchell-Lama co-ops that need capital repairs. I think, you know, as Scott and Michael both mentioned, like planning is really key here, and some of that can be done by, you know, HDFC shareholders yourself or by Mitchell-Lama shareholders yourself, but sometimes you need that professional technical assistance. I've talked to shareholders at amalgamated houses at Electchester who are facing really significant increased maintenance fees that the senior citizens really can't afford. They're on a fixed income. They can't afford it. And there isn't in place a long-term capital plan of how they're going to handle the fact that all of their building systems are reaching the end of their useful life, right? So they're in a crisis, in a financial crisis. They know that they can't go into financial distress, so they're doing what they can do, which is raising the maintenance fees on shareholders. And people are upset about it correctly. And what they need is help and assistance to put together a long-term capital plan so that they're thinking about the long-term affordability, making those repairs that are needed and planning them out over the next 2 years, 10 years, 15 years. And also that senior citizens who are on a fixed income are getting signed up for SPREE or, you know, DREE, if that's relevant for the individual shareholder. Or that, you know, it's difficult in this moment, but that a Section 8 voucher or rental assistance is available to people. So that if the long-term plan does include some type of maintenance increase, which it might, people who really can't afford it are able to stay comfortably in their homes without being rent burdened.
All of you now have alluded to new affordable home ownership in different ways, a new paradigm, new programs. So I want to you touch on it in different ways, but to hear from each of you, kind of what is your specific vision for the next generation of Mitchell-Lamas or the next generation of other affordable home ownership opportunities? And what is the model for it, and how do you build it so that they can really go a good long time, I think, without facing some of these capital investment crises we're hearing about. So why don't we start with, actually with you, Scott, and we'll work backwards.
Look, I think we have to go back into the housing business for real. Many of you know, you read about it, maybe you experience it, but the land use process in the city goes something like this. Luxury developer wants to build a big, tall building, and they go through the land use review process. I had to deal with this when I was borough president, and basically they promise to build affordable housing, which is actually unaffordable in so many of our communities. Michael mentions AMI, right? But basically we do minimal housing, minimal affordable housing. If you look at the history of the mayors, going back to LaGuardia with public housing, 2,200 buildings were built, right? Think about that. When you go back to Wagner and Lindsay with the Mitchell-Lama housing program, 100,000 units were built in less than 10 years, or 15 years. That housing was home to 400,000 people. When you look at what Koch did in the Bronx, and he said we're going to replenish the abandoned buildings in the Bronx and build affordable housing that stands to this day, we have been literally silenced in terms of our minimalist view. I want to go back and build a lot of housing very quickly. The way to do that is you start with the vacant land that the city has. I believe that when you have a vacant parcel of land, it can be two things. It could be a park, it could be a playground, or it could be affordable housing. And I think we should prioritize affordable housing, but not limit it to that, and start thinking about what the next generation housing looks like. We talk about supportive housing, but we never quite build enough to make a difference. We talk about housing for seniors. We never make enough housing to make a difference. And look, our young people, grandkids, kids that you want to keep in the city, I want to keep my kids in the city. My 11-year-old's been telling me for years he's never leaving my house. He told me the other day. He told me the other day, I said, you know, Miles, you're staying with me forever, right? He goes, Dad, I'm staying as long as I can. But I am not raising them to move to Iowa or Texas or Muskegon. So I need to make sure that we're also building housing for the next generation. And those are your kids and my kids. And we got to do that.
Well, first we have to ask ourselves, who's it affordable to? Come to you as someone who, my mom was homeless on church pews in Jamaica, and we sold dinner to pay our rent, to keep our place in Precedent Burnside. Come to you as someone where my wife and our girls are regularly talking about what is that next generation of what we need to have for our families. And when we think about what is happening right now, the two fundamental expenses that people are trying to endure every single day is housing and childcare. And so to your question, how do we create a new vision around this? First, AMI is broken. Area median income is not working for affordability. We need a local median income approach that is specific to our communities. We're seeing it work right now in Connecticut, what they're doing with baby bonds. We're seeing it in St. Louis. We're seeing it in Stockton, California. There is no good reason why we're not implementing that. If you do that, you're then creating affordable housing thresholds that are actually applicable to your community. It is the reason why we as New Yorkers voted for the true cost of living to be determined, but Eric Adams was so focused on trying to stay out of jail that he actually focused on implementing the law. Now, when we think about how we go further, we have to reimagine how we are building and building more creatively. We have to build more units. I said we have to get to 600,000 so we can make sure that we don't have New Yorkers that are working in New York but living in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and Pennsylvania. But be very thoughtful around how we reimbursing nonprofits faster so they can provide more support within these units and in these buildings as well. And simultaneously, when we think about that new vision of what Mitchell-Lama 2.0 and what affordable housing can be, it is being very intentional of how are we welcoming back our college graduates back home? How are we welcoming back our veterans back home? How are we being very intentional that we don't continue to have things so expensive so that you have 1 out of 8 New York State public school students who are homeless right now? The reality is it is not affordable for too many of us. And in large part, it's because of bad policies. Simultaneously, you have to help people to make and keep more money in their pocket, because it doesn't really matter if you're building more units if you don't have the money to pay for them.
So I think it's worth acknowledging that the history of the Mitchell-Lama program was used no capital subsidy, basically, right? It was low interest loans and tax exemptions, which is sort of unimaginable now in New York City if you're trying to build affordable housing because the land values are so expensive. So I think it does require us to get creative, which is why I like the idea of the golf courses so much. These are some of the last undeveloped large tracts of land. Electchester, which I already mentioned, was built on a former golf course. Rochdale Village was built on a closed race track, and Co-op City was built on a failed amusement park, right? We don't have too many like failed amusement parks left within the 5 boroughs. So thinking about how we do that large scale development, that big vision to really get, the impact that we want. We want to build new neighborhoods, new affordable housing in those neighborhoods. We don't just want, we also want like a 250 unit building or a new 3-unit co-op coming on our street. But when we really think about what's going to make an impact, I think thinking bolder and bigger about what we can do is important. And yeah, I think to that end, in addition to tripling the HPD's capital budget, Brad's plan calls for a $1 billion investment each year over the next from 2026 to 2030 into the Preservation Trust to also help acquire sites, underutilized sites throughout the city to develop more affordable housing. Basically, to really scale up what the public sector can do in terms of development and really build new social housing for the 21st century.
A couple of programming notes. I know we're going to be losing Scott Stringer in about 15 minutes.
Yes.
Okay, so I want to do a couple of
Well,
things.
I'll do speak forever. I'll do.
So I'm going to wait on a question about dam because you already talked about the dam tax abatement, but I will ask the other representatives here and candidates about that later. Also, I know we're going to have a little time later for questions from the audience, but I don't think that Scott, you will be here for that. I apologize. And I guess somebody will have to buttonhole you later for specific questions to you from the organizations as well. Okay, so moving on to other questions. Benjamin Mitchell-Lama, how do you ensure, timely and responsible oversight from, specifically HPD, HCR to the extent you can influence them as mayor, but, particularly how to speed up the loan approval process and other approval processes, that are currently frustrating, shareholders? So Celeste, why don't we start with you?
So I think, some about it is just pure capacity, right? It's ensuring that the agencies are properly staffed. There was really unprecedented staffing loss, during the pandemic. And the agencies, well, some of them have recovered more than others, but none of them really have fully recovered to their full capacity since what happened in March 2020, what began in March 2020. So I think just, reversing a lot of Adams era budget cuts, the program to eliminate the gaps, reduce staffing, and just reversing that so that staffing at these agencies is at the level that it's needed and to ensure that people get what they need from the city of New York. On the loan approvals, things as Comptroller, Comptroller Lander put out a plan on how to improve HPD, which include a lot of specific details, around improving the loan process. So really expediting a lot of the approvals, including just like removing the Office of Management Budget from like the day-to-day loan decisions that are happening, to try to get capital dollars out the door much more quickly. So I think I would say as well, I think some of this for HDFC co-ops and Mitchell-Lama co-ops is you aren't real estate developers, right? You're just regular people who are trying to democratically manage your housing. So ensuring that you also have the support, in coordinating, all of those experts that you need. You need to manage your architect, manage a contractor. A lot of that is very complicated and like is a professional career, and you all do a great job of managing it yourselves, but ensuring that you have the help and technical expertise that you need to get through that loan approval process, on an equal footing that a developer does to ensure that you're, getting, a square and like fair deal from the city.
You have a condo that we're living in the Bronx, and there was a come off the elevator. And we saw this gaping hole. This is gonna be connected to your question. There was a gaping hole right off the elevator. It was there for weeks, and you couldn't figure out what was going on. And effectively, there were wires just hanging out. And we went back to the board, went back to the manager, like, what is actually happening here? And there were vendors who were just like, oh, it's not that big of an issue. I was like, well, if a kid plays with it and they get hurt, it's a pretty big issue. If a fire starts, it's a pretty big issue. And so first to your question, you have to, yes, increase capacity in these agencies, but you also have to fire some people who have not been doing their job well. And there's a lot of people, I have served at every level of government. You would not allow someone to continue to hold on to jobs that are actually not doing their jobs. And a lot of times, the frustrations you are having with HPD and others is because of inefficiency, incompetence, and people just not executing what they should be doing.
And corruption.
Oh, no doubt about it, corruption. I don't want to run against you. You'd be a good candidate for mayor, right? Second, you're able to, on your phone, track if you want to fly somewhere, food order, all these different things. But you can't effectively, consistently track on your phone the requests that you need from the city in a responsive time. And I've consistently said that you have to have technology for good that is in the hands of the individual. And so when you are pursuing, whether it be a loan, whether it be a request, whatever the challenge is happening within city agencies, if you're able to do that for a package, why can't you do that for your home? And I just think that when you assess who you are electing for a mayor is a manager and a CEO of a $114 billion budget and 300,000 employees, essentially. When you think about what's happening here collectively. And I have managed at every level. I have managed 3 different small businesses. I have been an assembly member. I've seen it in DC as well. And you have to ask yourself, who is ready to manage better this city in the face of the cuts that are coming from Trump? Because you have to be able to, yes, increase capacity, but you have to increase efficiency while keeping humanity. That is the kind of mayor that I would be competing with.
I want to also throw in something. I heard somebody from the audience say corruption, and I think that's one of the things people do want to hear about. Yeah, how do you make the agencies more responsive, and including in that, dealing with corruption within Mitchell-Lama development, for example.
You know, and I think this matters, you know, it's easy in candidate debates, and I've been in a lot of these forums running for controller, mayor, local state assembly, been to a lot of forums, and there's a tendency to want to say yes to everything. So, you know, we have a $114 billion budget. I mean, by the time mayoral candidates were on the stage, we've already spent $200 billion, right? Because we just want to say yes to everything. But the thing that has to come up more in this campaign after de Blasio and Adams is who is best with the experience to rebuild our government, to reform our government. And what I want to showcase is that in every office I've held, I have not just existed within the rules of the office. When I was in the state assembly, I introduced the first rules reform, took on Shelley Silver and the powers of Albany and ended MTC voting. When I was the borough president, we upended how we appointed committee board members, went through a merit-based selection process that resulted in more diversity and more community-based planning that benefited tenants in the borough of Manhattan. As controller, not only did we fix the back office of the pension fund, but we consolidated the 5 different funds that got 9% return and invested in fossil fuel guns and private prisons. You need to manage these agencies, and the reason I'm qualified to do that is because I've audited all of them time and time again. I went to mention it times. I saw the inefficiencies in our government, and I know how to fix it. And basically, the job of mayor, yes, it is performative. Yes, it is swagger. You know, I have a lot of swagger.
Oh, what fun. Oh, what's the joke? Oh,
I mean, if you want to look at the stage, that's what it's like on the stage.
yeah, come on.
Well, it's rock star.
Hey, it's right choice voting people. But we do need a manager who knows how to govern the hell out of the city and build it back in a reform-minded way in the next 4 years, and that's what I offer.
We're going to mix up the schedule here a little bit to make sure that we get a couple last questions in while Scott is still here. So, second question from the audience, we kind of just already addressed, so I'll ask the first question, which is how do, the question is, how do you maintain affordability? Like what policies and programs would you implement? And some of the examples that the person asking the question gave are such as more tax abatements or grants or repair opportunities, low interest loans, or rent relief opportunities. Scott, I think you were just talking about, you know, making promises and spending money. All these things obviously cost money, but
I'll get back to that.
you know, what kind of anything off this particular menu or sort of like a set of ideas would you potentially embrace?
Look, I think we have to have a zero tolerance for landlords who prey on tenants and put people in very dangerous situations. It's all too common to see fire. It's all too common to see buildings in dire conditions. And I think we have to say enough is enough. So my Robin Hood plan would be very simple. If you're a really bad landlord doing really bad things to tenants, I'm going to take your building away, eminent domain, pay you the fair value of the building, then we will rehab it and make it safe. That's true with every building in the city. We have to do that. And that's not necessarily a money question, that's a justice question. And we have to protect people and children who live in these buildings. In terms of repairs, in terms of making sure that people have an opportunity to live and not jeopardize the building. One of the things we did when I was controller was work with the HDFCs to make sure that we privately, mayoral administration, fought to get the resources necessary. Once again, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I'll try to do that as mayor, and I believe that it's very important.
Okay. And yeah, I think the question is, I'm guessing is specific to HDFCs and Mitchell-Lamas. Again, sort of what will you do to promote affordability?
Well, first, we have to assess affordability in the totality of it. There's not just the affordability of what's happening in terms of you paying for what's happening within your home. It's the collective cost of life that is making life much more less affordable. We do, yes, need to consider loan opportunities, but I do think we have to start seriously considering providing grants out for emergency relief out of reserves. How do we continue to say to New Yorkers that we are in a cost of living economic crisis? We have $3.1 billion of reserves that are there right now, that your taxpayer dollars went to. That would not be impacting pension dollars that we separate for that in terms of rainy day. I do believe that's something that has to be on the table, by that kind of relief, immediately, to that degree. Going an extension on this, I think we have to make sure that we actually implement what you voted on when we did charter revisions around the true cost of living, to understand what are all the elements that are making life unaffordable for someone that's in Mitchell-Lama and on HDFC. Because if we understand the totality of costs, then we can address them in totality as well. We're effectively putting on a Band-Aid to address this problem over and over again. I can give you one individual loan, I can give you one individual grant, I can give you one, but if we're not stopping and saying, what is leading to all these rising costs? And one of the things I do believe needs to be on the table for an entity that has not actually abided by the thresholds that you wanted to do, have affordability for tax incentives, we should rescind those incentives. Why would you continue to allow people to make money off of us that are actually not implementing affordability in a real way? And then lastly, I go back to the core. You have to find more direct ways to actually have an effort around LMI to get to the question around affordability. Because we are dancing on the edges without actually knowing the true numbers. I can provide immediate relief in some targeted ways, but I have to have a comprehensive vision that is giving you a broader vision around that.
And we have one more thing for you before you go, Celeste first.
I think I answered some of that a little bit before, so maybe I'll try to add a little. I think incentivizing people to want to stay at affordability is like important, thinking about HDFC co-ops. And what I mean by that is having, you know, really what David mentioned in introducing AHIFA earlier, which is having a fair regulatory agreement, right? People want to stay at HDFC, they want to get a new Article 11 tax exemption, but they don't want it to come with these really onerous restrictions that take away the democratic control of the housing, right? So ensuring that there is a regulatory agreement that is fair, that respects the independence and self-management of the HDFC community, but provides that tax exemption, I think is really key. And this relates, I think we'll talk about the tax cap as well, but just ensuring that those documents are done like again, I think it's about in partnership with the HDFC community, which I think is broad, right? There's a lot of different voices of the HDFC community, but done in partnership and not just kind of shoved down the throats of people in this room and told like it's kind of this way or that way. So I think doing that together and making sure that, yeah, there's just that the choice feels like there's a choice, I guess, but incentivizing it in a way that feels fair. Because I think a lot of people have felt like we have to kind of swallow this poison pill of a regulatory agreement that has a lot of challenging things in it that maybe we can't even like ensure that we'll do because there are expectations that are so difficult. Instead of, and that's the option, it's like do that or not get a new tax exemption. So I think ensuring that there's a fair regulatory agreement that people can willingly sign up for is important. Because right, you need 67% of your shareholders to vote for it. You kind of have to have it with something that you believe in as a board.
Richard, where is Richard? We need Richard up here to ask a couple of questions to the candidates, and then I'll wrap up talking to the panel centers.
I'll come on the other side. Want to catch straight before you left. It's two very important questions that I think the shareholders definitely want to know for sure. These are commitment questions. We're here in solidarity as Mitchell-Lama and HDFC co-ops. But we're also in solidarity with our rent-stabilized New Yorkers and the broader tenant movement. Will you commit to reforming the rent guideline boards to have mayoral appointees approved by the city council? And so, we can start. But I have another one too, so you can stay. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No. And I'll tell you why. When I'm mayor, I do not want to get caught up in the bureaucracy of a back and forth when I know I'm going to appoint strong pro-tenant representatives, and I will reform the rent guidelines board. I'll do right by the people in this room and the audience who know my history for 30 years as a pro-tenant assembly member, and that track record is coming to City Hall. But I'm not going to commit to building a bureaucracy when I can just take care of it as mayor.
I agree. I would say no, because first, it actually will delay the process of actually helping you. Second, what we got to do is actually appoint people with you that are representing the community. Because you actually want to have a greater voice that's there.
Yes, that's in Brad's.
Now, the second question is, will you commit, something about that word commitment, will you commit to meeting with Mitchell-Lama and HDFC shareholders to develop a plan for these specific kinds of affordable cooperative housing?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. When I created the waiting list bills by sitting with you over and over again, 100%.
As a former chair of the Mitchell-Lama Political Action Committee and as the controller who had the Mitchell-Lama Task Force and a borough president who had a Mitchell-Lama Task Force, the answer is I will be meeting with the HDFCs and the Mitchell-Lamas as I've done for most of all practically my entire career. Commitment.
Have any of you ever lived or know of someone very close to the family that lives in a Mitchell-Lama or HDFC?
Yes.
That's lived or don't have a family member?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I know more people who live in Mitchell-Lama than everyone in this room put together. Trust me, I know everybody.
I worked at UHAB for 5 years, so I know some.
All right. A second. And, let's talk
My
about
grandmother lived in Corp City.
Oh, okay. Now, we was talking about swag. I noticed that your microphone matches your socks.
You're playing the game right there.
Thank y'all.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
Let me go back to just a couple more questions for the panel. Is Scott, are you still with us?
I got a book, but can I just say goodbye?
Please.
We'll be together again soon. I want to thank you for informing my views on politics and government and what's possible in communities. Many of you have built our city, not just for the very rich, but for all people, middle-income people, the working poor. If we get through this mayoral administration and we stop Cuomo, better days are to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so we have just a couple more questions for Michael and Celeste, and we may wrap up literally. One is what I think Scott already talked about a little bit earlier, which is the dam tax abatement. And I apologize to the interpreters. Can someone here tell me what DAM stands for?
Vision of alternative management.
Oh, of course. You know, Joe Center from UHAB taught me that many years ago. Okay, so, yeah, so as we discussed briefly that the abatement expires in 2029. What will you do about that? What will your candidate do about that? I'll start with Celeste.
Yeah, I mean, I think make a commitment to figuring out how to extend the dam tax cap, in partnership with the HDFC community. I can keep going, but I think the answer is we'll figure out how to extend the dam tax cap in a way that ensures long-term affordability for the HDFC community. I think, there's urgency here. I know this, and I read it in the briefing materials around the uncertainty that's been looming for a long time and the difficulty that it's created for HDFCs in finding, private and public, but particularly private financing. When you have this fiscal cliff coming up in 4 years, it's hard to get a 15 or 30-year loan. It creates a lot of risk for the private lenders. So I think there's real urgency in getting this done as quickly as possible. And yeah, committing to doing that.
Oh, and I should, there's another piece to the question I want to make sure you both answer, which is also around, the uneven application of the dam tax cap, so that buildings in continually disinvested neighborhoods receive the least benefit, while buildings in gentrified neighborhoods receive the most. So would you?
I can respond really quickly.
Yeah.
I think this is actually an inequity that exists in the entire system of property taxes in New York City, which is something that Brad has made a big focus of his time as comptroller. We need state action to fix that, but I think that there are ways that we could address the inequities within the new dam tax cap. But yeah, homeowners in Brooklyn pay, or like in Brownstone, Brooklyn, and Park Slope, and in areas like that, pay a remarkably lower effective tax rate because the values of their home have risen so much, which is the same thing that's happening here in calculating the dam tax cap. But what doesn't make sense for HDFC co-ops is that it's decommodified housing. So it is tied to this assumption that the assessed value over time is going to, the owners are going to be able to some of that benefit, which is just not true when you have fixed share prices. So having a system that really relates to, the dam tax cap is for HDFC co-ops, it should work for HDFC co-ops. So creating a tool that doesn't create those same inequities that exist in the broader system, I think is part of the solution.
I think we can all agree that we have to find a way to extend it and improve, especially when we think about timeline. But to the point, very specifically around that equity, is someone from the Bronx have seen it over and over again. And this is another reminder that we have a scenario where communities are actually not having an opportunity to benefit from the tax system because they're seen as too poor and not getting enough generated revenue here. I'm gonna sound like a broken record. It's another reminder of why we have to have changes when it comes to property tax reform collectively around how we assess what's happening in the values of our communities. And again, we think through AMI, we think through what's going on across our city. We are being hurt by poor policy, and we work in collaboration with you to actually have a thoughtful, localized approach that truly has equity. Whether it be the Bronx, whether it be Queens, it's unfair that too often we are not able to get access to these applications. And large markets we're seen as not having enough value. That is not how we are as a city. That's not how we will be run there.
And actually, there's one follow-up question to that from AHIFA, which is, should a new dam tax cap after 2029 be tied to affordability measures such as a sales price cap?
I think it's hard to answer that on the spot. I guess I would want to think about it a little bit in partnership with Brad. But I think thinking about having something that fits for everybody is difficult when you think about like the sort of various nature of HDFC co-ops and like in the spirit of self-management. But I think tying it to some affordability requirements is key, as like the goal of it is to create an option for them to stay as affordable housing. I think the legislation that's been proposed is like far too high in what that is. So working in partnership with people to find what that maximum is, or, a lot of HDFCs have their own resale policies that they put into place that are far below. So I think it's difficult to have a one size fits all thing like that, but I think having something that's capped, and also in compliance with what the mandates of Article 11, right, which like the max sales price is supposed to be 165% of AMI. That's a requirement for HDFC co-ops. That seems very high too. But thinking of something that, balances affordability with, equity creation, which is like a goal of HDFC co-ops overall, obviously.
I'm reluctant to make the commitment offhand. I think you want to have someone who's a mayoral candidate who listens to a very legitimate question and come back to the details there.
And this is the final question for me, and I'm sorry Scott's not here to answer it because I know how important it is to the Mitchell-Lama shareholder community. But this is specifically around the Article 2 to Article 11 conversions, right? Which folks here maybe can even, I may put out what's that called, a lifeline, or like help me out here because I'm quickly getting up to speed on this, right? Go Fred. But this is basically the initiatives that have been attempted at the city level for a while to say, well, okay, Mitchell-Lama, you can convert to an HDFC and use that conversion to basically access capital investment by being able to sell units. I think that's more or less what we're talking about. And I think folks here are very concerned about that and a lot of the risks that are attendant to that. So the question accordingly is, will you ensure that the agencies act to preserve existing Mitchell-Lama cooperatives by discontinuing the special Article 2 to Article 11 conversion program? So that's another on-the-spot question.
So I think like I'm also hesitant to commit to anything also because I'm not Brad. But I will say that Brad has consistently opposed 2 to 11 conversions, including the most recent one that was proposed. I forget if it was Cabin Plaza or Towers, but he came in Towers. At Cabin Towers, which was recent in the last year or so. I think that vote occurred and Brad was vocal in opposing that conversion.
In theory, yes, I'm agreeing. Itself, conversions, as they're being laid out, are not helpful to us at all. It will lead to you losing power, lead to you losing the voice. But I think we have to assess what makes sense moving forward. But too often, you worked hard to have a home, and you should have an opportunity where you lose it because someone else in the city is trying to make more money off of you.
Okay, that is it for the questions from me. So now I want to turn it back to the candidate and to the representative of the candidate for just closing remarks.
So I mentioned that I worked at UHAB for 5 years. Something I've worked now for Brad for 3 years. I'm here as a volunteer, but Brad himself also started in community development. He worked for 15 years before he ran for city council in community development at organizations like UHAB, at the Fifth Avenue Committee and the Pratt Center. And I think in the same way that working with HDFC co-ops, working with Mitchell-Lama shareholders has shaped how I think about housing policy, it's shaped how Brad thinks about housing policy. He spent the early days of his career rehabbing city-owned buildings, working with shareholders, putting in sweat equity to be put on a path towards homeownership. He deeply understands those issues and the struggles that you all are facing as your housing stock ages. And I think understands really what the tools and solutions are to be put into place to protect your homes in the long term. And I think we have a really great plan for how to expand the model. We didn't get to talk too much. I focused a little bit on more on the large scale development of the golf courses and the new Mitchell-Lamas. But we also in the housing plan have a lot of proposals to increase the HDFC community as well. It's been a long time since there's been a big expansion of HDFCs. But there is a lot of, as Scott mentioned, there's a lot of distressed housing, and we need proposals that put that housing back in community control. And you should check out the housing plan, which has a lot of those details about how we can do that.
First, thank you all for letting us be here tonight. I'm grateful that you had some time. We deserve better in our city. We deserve a new generation of leadership. We deserve to have people that actually want to fight for us and fight for you. I am running because we have a vision on how we can help people with the true cost of living and making it keep more money in your pocket. We're running because we fundamentally believe that you have to have better equitable housing approaches, which is why we'll continue to say that when an assessment of credit scores should not be used for rental homeownership applications at all. It is a thought process that you can't have public safety and public transportation and public housing and public education all working for us. But in order to have true affordable housing, we have to have someone that's being thoughtful about how and what we are meaning by being affordable. Because right now, the question that people are asking every single day is, who is it affordable to? And so I come to you as someone who has done this work at every level of government, from being a local community organizer, from being an assembly member in Albany, to being a presidential aide for President Obama. And I'm running right now because we can actually lay out a vision of how to do this better for our city to move forward. My name is Michael Blake, and if you believe that this is something that we deserve, I ask that you join us. I ask that you don't trip back there, we were just tripped right there. And I ask that you see that it is our time to do something different for our city in this next generation of leadership. Again, our website is BlakeForNYC.com. And if you believe like me that tomorrow begins today, I ask that you rank Michael Blake as your first choice of mayor. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Liberty, please come on back up. Close things out.
Come on, y'all, let's give them a hand for coming on out. Come on, y'all. What y'all say out here? I want to thank the candidates. Scott Stringer, Mr. Michael Drake, and representing Brad Lander and Celeste Farmer. Come on, y'all. What I love about it is that y'all enthusiastic, y'all are ready to give. So if voting was tomorrow, y'all probably be the first ones online. But with all of that being said, it was an exciting evening. It was an evening for y'all to, as I told you in the beginning, to listen, pay attention, write things down, take it back home to your house or community. And when you do that, then you can make a decision that you're glad to live with. But the things I told you, are you willing to live with it? You're willing to go, and it was a candidate here that really excited you, that really moved you. So reminder, to be critical about the information you just heard from candidates, and think about how you're going to vote. It ain't got long, it's coming up real soon. Reason we're doing this as HDFCs and Mitchell-Lama is because we have power. When we show up together, especially in local elections, look at the power that's in this room tonight. Might be dark, but there's power. Bring this information back to your neighbors and tell them what you heard and why this election is important as affordable cooperative residents. We want to keep what we got, and we want to pass it down to generations and generations. I mean, I know I do. I have grandchildren, you know, and y'all figure out the number, you know. But I want them to be able to afford to live in New York City and not go nowhere. I ain't going nowhere. Democratic primary is June 24th. Don't forget to make a plan to vote. Reminders: this event hosted jointly by AHIFA and CU4ML with support from UHAB. One of many ways we engage and work to better our community. If you aren't already joining our meetings and getting our messages, sign up to join us. You probably got some information when you came in. You know, it's not to be used as a coaster, okay? is for you to utilize it so that you can become more involved, so that you can not only just have to come to these meetings today, but you're a part of it from here on out. Cool? All right. I would have said amen, but I forgot when I preached here. Next, CU4ML meeting for Mitchell-Lama shareholders is Tuesday, May 6th, from 6 to 8 p.m. And the next AHIFA meeting for HDFC shareholders is Thursday, April 24th at 6 p.m. on Zoom. We want to say thank you to the Center at West Park for hosting us. This is a nice place. Well, I'm thinking, I do events, looking good there. We want to thank all our volunteers, behind the scenes, whether they're here or not, this thing took months to put together. We want to thank AHIFA, CU4ML, and UHAB. Come on, give them a hand, y'all. Oh, wow. Did y'all just hear that? That was a school ball that rang. Class is over. You're dismissed. Thank y'all so much for coming out. Get on safe. God bless you all.